They opened the heavy metal door and found her cell empty. It was a cool night at the state prison. Lights blinked along the tall fence. Guards walked slow patterns with flashlights. Cameras turned their cold, unblinking eyes. In cell block D, where the most dangerous prisoners waited their final day, a small bed lay perfectly made. A toothbrush sat in a cup. Her name tag, Inmate 4721 Maria Lane, hung on the wall. But there was no sound, no footsteps, no breathing. She had been on death row, scheduled for her execution in a few weeks. Now she was gone. A guard shouted. Other guards came rushing, boots pounding on concrete. Keys rattled. Radios buzzed. They checked the cameras. A camera over the hallway showed the cell door close at midnight. The timestamp glowed. Then, at 12:07 a.m., the camera showed a shadow, too fast to be a person. The image looked wrong, like a glitch. The door was still closed. But the next morning, the prisoner count was one low. Paperwork, phones, and heads spun with questions. How did she leave? Where did she go? Who helped her? People whispered her name all over the town. On the news, anchors spoke into cameras with worried faces. At the coroner's office, detectives tapped their pens and stared at lists. Outside the prison, a crowd pressed near the gates, hungry for answers. They wanted to know if a monster had escaped or if a mistake had been made. The governor demanded a report. People remembered the crimes. They remembered the victims. They remembered the trial. No one believed someone could just vanish from death row. And yet she was gone, and the whole country leaned in to watch what would happen next. Then, in the dark of the morning, a phone call came through to the sheriff's office. A whisper, a voice that said one short thing before the line went dead. She's not who you think. The call ended. The sheriff put his hand to his face and sighed. 1,000 possibilities raced at once through his mind. Who had phoned? Was it a prank or a clue? The hunt had begun. But the real question, why had she escaped, and where was she going now, hung like a thick fog that rolled slowly into every room of the town. Everyone wanted answers, but the answers were buried in the past, in a life that started far away from prisons and headlines. To understand what happened that night, you had to go back to the beginning. Maria Lane was born on a rainy morning in a small town in Ohio. Her mother, Ellen, worked in a diner and wore flour on her apron like a second skin. Her father, Carl, drove trucks and came home tired. The house was small, with 2 bedrooms and a yard that smelled of cut grass. Maria learned to tie her shoes at 4. She learned the names of the birds at school. She learned to listen to the way her mother's voice dropped when she was scared. The house was not full of anger every day, but there were days when the air felt heavy, like a balloon about to pop. At 8 years old, Maria found a secret place behind the old shed, a stack of newspapers tied with string. The papers told stories of other places, other people. The headlines talked about big things: fires, elections, sports. Maria loved the rustle of the pages. When she read about brave reporters and police solving crimes, she felt a shiver of excitement as if the world was a great puzzle and she could find every missing piece. But she also watched how headlines could hurt, how they could point fingers and name people in ways that felt sharp. The first time she heard a story about a person who hurt others, her stomach tightened. She imagined the victims as dolls with eyes that watched her. She grew into a tall, quiet girl with dark hair and serious eyes. At school, she finished her homework and kept to herself. She held back from loud jokes and bright smiles. People said she was smart but distant. Her teachers liked her work, but wondered why she never joined clubs or sports teams. In high school, she dated a boy named Mark for a short time. There were afternoons at the park, and shy notes passed between lockers. But the relationship did not last. Someone told stories about her. Rumors could be small fires that spread quickly, and in Maria's life, those fires burned things she could not always put back together. After school, she moved to the city. She worked odd jobs: a receptionist, a clerk, a brief stint in a bookstore where she shelved thrillers and true crime novels. The books felt like mirrors. She would flip to pages describing detectives and victims, and sometimes imagine the lives behind the words. The city was loud and full of people who spoke fast. Yet Maria kept the edges. She learned to listen, to watch, and a plan for a life that would always be a little bit private. Years passed. Then the first crime happened. Small at first, a theft from a closed shop, a night when shadows were the only witnesses. No one connected Maria to that theft then. But later, police found a clue, a unique bracelet near the scene. It had belonged to a woman who had disappeared from a neighborhood shelter years earlier. Proof was thin, but the bracelet caught the eye of a detective named Sam Riley. Sam had been on the force for 2 decades and had a way of looking at small things like they were keys to big doors. Detective Riley started to see patterns. He found old records, reports that seemed unrelated when you looked at them on paper, but that began to hum together when he laid them side by side. Missing persons, small robberies, a note here, a witness there. The city is a web of stories. Riley thought he could follow the threads back to the center. He checked surveillance tapes and interviewed neighbors. He asked questions that made people uncomfortable. And one night, after putting pieces together for months, he found a connection that made his stomach drop. Maria's name came up in a case file from 5 years before, a woman who lived in the same building and had been seen leaving the day a man was found unconscious in an alley. No one had thought much of it then, but the man in the alley later died without the cause being clear. The case file had grown cold. Now, with new eyes on it, the file warmed. Riley believed someone had been moving through the city, touching lives and slipping away. He believed Maria might be that someone. They arrested Maria on a rainy Tuesday. She was quiet as the officers read her rights. She stood in the doorway of a cheap apartment, shoes wet, face pale. In court, the prosecutor painted a picture of a woman who could change her face like a mask. The defense said she was misunderstood, a victim of rumor and bad luck. But the jury heard the stories, the missing people, the strange disappearances, the bracelet, the faint fingerprints. They listened to the victims' families who spoke softly about loss. The courtroom felt like a theater where each person played a part. When the verdict came, the judge's gavel hit the block like thunder. Guilty. The sentence, death. The news spread fast. People argued on talk shows and online message boards. Some said the justice system had done its job. Others said they feared a mistake. Maria's face became a printed image in newspapers and a little square on television screens. She sat for interviews, her voice small and precise, saying she was innocent. She wrote letters to her mother and to the judge. She learned the routine of prison life. Early mornings, loud meals, the creak of metal doors. Each day was a slow clock, winding down. On death row, Maria did not sleep much. She wrote poetry in the margins of legal papers. She said she wanted to tell her story to anyone who would listen. Sometimes a guard would hum as he walked past. Sometimes a visitor would bring a small radio tuned to music. Prison taught her the language of waiting. It taught her to watch the way time moved like a tide, slow and steady, pulling things away. Detective Riley never stopped thinking about the case. Even after the trial, he kept a copy of the evidence in his desk drawer. He read the transcripts at night. He felt a wash of doubt, sometimes like a cold breeze through an open window. What if they had missed something? What if a shadow on a tape cam looked like a person but was not? He checked old files again and again until his eyes felt tired. But then one small note in a witness statement from years ago made his breath catch. A detail that no one had thought important. A mention of a creative theater mask stored in a warehouse near the river. Riley's mind latched onto it. It seemed like nothing. Yet once it lodged in his thoughts, it would not let go. Prison life went on. Maria learned the names of the guards and the schedule of the meals. She spoke in careful whispers to the other inmates. Some people feared her. Others avoided her. A few tried to befriend her. But friendship in prison could be tricky, like walking on glass with bare feet. Maria kept most things close to her chest. She read the legal papers and watched the guards' routes. She made small notes in her mind about what to expect if the unexpected ever happened. And then on a night when the rain tapped the windows like nails, the impossible occurred. A power surge rolled through the grid, and lights flicked for a single breath. Cameras blinked out for a minute. Guards muttered and checked their panels. In that tight, breathing silence, something shifted. The metal door to Maria's cell was found empty. The bed lay smooth. The toothbrush stood. Her name tag still hung on the wall. The guards called a count and found the number short. How had she left? What had she done? Some said she had help. Some thought she had found a secret tunnel. Others whispered about glitchy cameras and clever tricks. But the thing that made everyone hush and lean in was not how she was gone. It was a single message written on a staff notebook left on her bunk. 3 words, scrawled in a hurried hand. I did not. The message tore at people's minds like a sharp wind. Had she written it as proof of innocence? As a joke? As a call for help? The warden read the paper and folded it slowly. He stared at the ink and then at the empty cell. He wanted to shout and demand and lock every door. But the thought of Maria loose in the night made the hairs on his arms stand up. Detective Riley stood outside the prison gate when the news came through. He felt the old files in his pocket like hot coals. He thought of the theater masks, of the bracelets, of the witness who had said a woman with dark hair walked near the river that night. He knew the case had not ended with the gavel. Something else was moving now, and the next move would be dangerous. A message had been left. A camera had shown a shadow. A phone call had whispered words before it cut. The town held its breath. Families who had lost someone watched television and hoped for answers. Maria's mother sat at home and stared out at the rain, hands folded so tight her knuckles whitened. She would not sleep either. She waited for hope or for a sign that this was a mistake, or for a knock at her door. Then, as dawn began to pull the sky into light, a reporter on the scene read aloud from a small, folded note found under the cell door. The reporter's voice trembled when she reached the last line. The note said, simply, tell them about the masks. That was all. No address, no plan, no explanation. Only 3 words that felt like a key turned slowly in a lock. The cameras zoomed in on the note. The hashtag started to trend on social media. People guessed and argued. Conspiracy sites lit up. The police line moved. Detectives pushed into the morning. Doors slammed. Cars roared away. No one knew yet whether the note led to salvation or more trouble. Maria had escaped death row. The town buzzed with fear and curiosity. The note mentioned masks. Detective Riley grabbed his coat and drove toward the river warehouses. He thought of names and faces, and every small clue he had once brushed aside. Meanwhile, someone watched from a place where the city's lights could not reach, a person wrapped in a dark coat, hands folded, breathing steady. They watched the gates and the line of flashing cars, and then turned and walked away into the fog. The chase had begun. The story had peaked, and now it folded back to start, tracing the small choices and shaky steps that led them here. But before the detectives could find the answers, before the nation could turn another page in its newspapers, something new happened that would make the world gasp again. As Detective Riley reached the old theater district, his phone buzzed. A short video was sent to his number. On it, a stage in an empty theater was shown. Dozens of masks hung like fruit on racks, their eyes hollow and staring. A single spotlight was on, trembling like a heartbeat. The frame shook. Then the camera panned slowly to a bench beneath the masks, and there, resting on the wood, was a locket. Inside the locket was a photograph of someone Riley had thought about for years, a woman who had been reported missing long before Maria's arrest. The video stopped. The final frame showed words painted on the stage in red. Do you remember her? Detective Riley dropped his phone. His breath hitched. The theater door was locked, but the video's timestamp showed it had been filmed 30 minutes earlier. Someone was playing a long game, and Riley had just been handed another piece of the puzzle. He did not know if it saved anyone or hurt more people. He only knew one thing. Tonight would not end quietly. He ran toward the old theater, keys forgotten in his pocket, heart pounding hard enough to taste at the back of his throat. He pushed at the heavy door. It gave. Inside, the light swung like a slow metronome. The mask stared. The locket lay where the video had shown. But he was not alone. From the shadowed balcony above him, a shape moved, quick and silent. Riley called out, his voice loud in the dusty theater. No answer came. Then, from the darkness, something crashed to the floor. A scream cut through the air, a sound so raw it made Riley cover his ears. And then everything went black.